In this video, we will show you how to replace your power steering return line on the Chevy Trailblazer. This will be located between your power steering cooler and your power steering reservoir. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we need to mention is whenever you're doing something power steering related, it's a good idea to flush the system with the manufacturer specified fluid. Once you've done so, you want to remove as much of it as possible from the power steering reservoir. Now underneath the driver's side front of the vehicle here is where we're going to find our power steering cooler. We're removing the lower line here. This is the one that makes its way all the way up to the power steering pump. Now before you start removing this clamp, it's important to make sure you have a collection bucket under the area so you can recycle all of the fluid properly. We'll loosen this clamp, slide it out of the way, and remove the hose from the cooler. Now as we start pulling this off of here, you want to be careful not to damage the power steering cooler. That makes its way in and behind this area and all the way across the front of the radiator. Typically for this, I'll be holding onto the power steering cooler, trying to pull it forward while I pry the hose off. If you need to, you can cut this hose. We're replacing it anyway. Now as that's draining, we'll follow the hose. You'll find that you have a mounting bracket that holds our power steering pressure line and the return line to the frame here. Up along the top there is a 10mm headed bolt that we will gain access to in 1 minute, but let's pause in this area and make our way to removing these two 13mm headed bolts holding this bracket in place. Quick inspection of that bracket, we'll set this aside. Now we'll be using a flexible head 10mm ratcheting wrench. To get to this bolt, it's going to be fairly difficult to reach your hand up in here. If you were to use a 1/4-inch socket and try to put it on there, you're going to hit up against the crank pulley, which is the lower pulley on the engine. We'll just use this wrench. There's that bolt. Now we can take hold of this bracket and the hose. Once again, we're being careful for any fluid coming out of the hose here. We want it all to go in the bucket and never on the ground. As I spin this bracket, we'll have a look along what would be considered the top area. Now if this was still in place, it would be sitting just like this. Now looking right here, you can tell that there's two locking tabs. We need to carefully pull those away so we can separate these two pieces. You can use a flathead screwdriver, some pliers, whatever works best for you. There's one, we'll do the same to the other. Now at this point we can remove the line that we are replacing. You could fully remove the bracket if you want, or just leave it in this area, that's fine. Now that we've done this, it's time to gain access to where this connects into the reservoir. You can access this two different ways. One would be from along the top, but it's fairly hard to see this, especially if you were trying to put the line back in place. With the front end of the vehicle lifted up, you should be able to reach right inside over your right front wheel into the wheel well, and you'll have a clear view of that power steering return line, making its way all the way up to the reservoir. If you have a hard time reaching this due to the wheel being in place, continue on to removing the wheel. To remove the wheel, we'll make sure that we're up high enough that we can spin it. Continue on to removing the center cover with a plastic trim tool so you don't cause any damage. Once that's out of the way, we'll remove all 6 of our 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. To remove the hose from the reservoir, we'll just use some pliers to squeeze on the clamp. We'll slide that down far enough that we can remove the hose. Now at this point, we'll carefully start working the hose off of the reservoir. Keep in mind, this is the last mounting point for this hose. Should be coming right out of the vehicle after this. Take hold of that hose and remove it from the vehicle. There it is, friend. Okay, friend, let's get ready for the installation of our brand new power steering return line. Carefully take this and put it in place. We're going to make our way all the way up to that reservoir. We'll start mounting that here. Slide that up on there. Now we can slide the clamp into the proper position, making sure that we have hose on both sides of the clamp. Go ahead and try to pull this out of place. You definitely don't want that falling off. Once you're sure it's secured to the reservoir, we'll continue along the front of the vehicle. We'll take the rubber mount from the original line and slide it in place onto the new line. Now at this point, we're going to apply this to the bracket. We'll squeeze the bracket together, peen over each of those two locking ears, swing this over, and remount it along the top of the frame with the 10mm headed mounting bolt. Hold it in place with some locking pliers so we can peen over those two ears. Let's use some pliers. We'll take our bolt, put it through the bracket. We'll give this a little twist, get everything aligned properly here. Now we're going to align the bolt with the mounting bolt hole. You can kind of see it if you were to look through this hole here. We'll just move everything around as needed. This is one of the hardest parts, just getting this bracket bolt in. Once you get it started, generally it's a little easier. Obviously, we don't want to break that bolt off. That feels secure. We'll move along to putting on our bracket across the front here. Shield on here. All right, now we can get that hose onto the power steering cooler. While pressing this on, you also want to be holding on to the far side of the power steering cooler, pressing it rearward while we press the line forward, slipping them together. Double check to make sure it's completely bottomed out. We don't want this hose sliding off. We'll take the clamp, slide it onto the hose. We want to make sure we have hose showing on each side of the clamp. Take hold of that, give it a wiggle, try to pull it off of there. Assuming that's secure, you can move along to reinstalling your right front wheel. We'll get the wheel on here, start on all of our 19mm lug nuts, bottom them out, and get the wheel back on the ground. Once we've done that, we can torque each of these to 100 foot-pounds. Now with the wheel back on the ground, let's torque these in a crisscross manner. Now we can put on the center cover. When doing so, you want to pay attention along the edge on the inboard side. You're going to find a small picture that looks like a valve stem. This is the valve stem of your wheel right here. We'll align those two areas and gently drive this into place. Now we can make our way into the engine compartment to fill up the power steering system. When you're filling the system, typically it's a good idea to have your front wheels just a little bit up off the ground so we can take that steering wheel and go side to side. We'll talk a little bit more about that in 1 second. Let's make our way up into the engine compartment. Now we can start filling the power steering system. There's a couple things we want to pay attention to. First of all, it's a good idea to have both front wheels up and off the ground just a tiny bit. Now once we've done that, we're going to start adding the manufacturer specified fluid directly into the reservoir. If you were to look at the power steering cap, you'll find that you have a small dipstick that is attached to the cap. Down along the bottom, there's a small line that says add. Moving up, you have a line with a C for cold, and then a line with an H for hot. These are the levels that we want to be at when the power steering fluid is full. If it's cold, you want to be at that cold level. If it's hot, it's going to come up a little bit because fluid expands, and it should be in the hot level here. It's okay if the fluid's a little high at this point because we do have to burp out any air in the system. Let's get the key in the on position here. Now we'll start turning the wheel slowly all the way to one side. Once we're at that point, we'll pause and then continue all the way over to the other side. This isn't a race. All we're trying to do is burp out any air in the system and allow fluid to make its way down and through. We'll just make sure we're checking on that fluid as we continue, top it off as necessary. Let's repeat this process as many times as it takes to remove as much air as possible. Because if you were to start up the vehicle with any air in the system, it's going to create a whole bunch of air bubbles and cause an issue. Now that we've gone side to side several times, we'll just check that fluid level before we start it up. As you can tell, the dipstick is showing that we are very low. So we'll just add up to the cold line, start up the vehicle, let it run, check for leaks. Oh yeah, that looks good. Let's start it up. While this is running, we'll just continue turning the wheels side to side. I'm listening to hear if I can hear any type of odd howling noise coming from the power steering pump. While I do so, that would mean that there's air in the system. This sounds perfect. Now that we've run the vehicle and we're sure that we have no more air in the system, we'll make sure that we have the vehicle back down on a flat level surface so we can confirm the level of the fluid. Just pull that out. As you can tell, I'm right up to the C range here for cold, which is exactly where I need to be. The engine hasn't exactly warmed up all the way yet. We'll clean this off, reinstall it. Okay, friend, we installed the power steering line in our vehicle. We let it run for a little while, we checked for leaks, and we burped out all the air in the system. We double checked to make sure we're at the proper level. At this point, we just want to go ahead and clean up the mess, triple check for leaks, and then take the vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.